last time I spoke before a dinner crowd in Austin, Texas was in the fall of 1968, and I was the only freshman in the Moore Hill Dining Hall from Arkansas. Well, Mac McKinney had smelled that out somewhere, and he asked me to audition for him on calling the Hogs the week of the Arkansas game. And I did, and he said, "You're just what I was looking for." So I started at noon on Monday calling the Hogs in Moore Hill, so noon and night, until Thursday at lunch. And after I would call the Hogs, I would go over to the baseball table that was right here by the front door, and I would get as small as possible. And I happened to glance up on that Thursday after I had performed, and I caught eye contact with Glenn Hossel right across the room. Now, the Austin American Statesman called him a swirling ball of butcher knives. The football team wouldn't eat by him. And he says this. I look at the baseball guys and say, "I'm dead, but I got nowhere to run." I go over there, and Hossel says, "Who put you up to that?" I said, "Mac McKinney." And he says, "Well, I've heard enough of it." And McKinney raised up and goes, "That was the end of my hog calling at the University of Texas. But you boys over there crowing about that 30-game win streak, I did my part. I got y'all rolling right there." But I look over at my buddies here and what kind of men they became, the families they raised, the women they married, and a lot of the other folks in here. I mean, if you were looking for a place in the fall of 1968 to send a kid to, and he would be around folks that would make him better than he could ever be by himself, Austin, Texas, University of Texas was the zip code. This was it. And I look over, we've stayed close all these 40-some-odd years. About 40 years ago, Bert Hooton told me, he says, "I'm the best friend you're ever going to have." And he was pretty close. My wife, Sandra, who couldn't be here, she finished first, but Bert's right there. And how good a friend is he? My date this weekend, filling in for Sandra, is his daughter, Lane. Now, that's a buddy. And then you got the aforementioned Tommy Harmon sitting over there, and his lovely wife, Debbie. I always loved Debbie because she is the only one I ever knew that talked slower than I do. And I remember one night, I don't know who I had a date with. I didn't ever have a steady girlfriend down here. And we're over at the SAE house, and Tommy had to go to the restroom, and Debbie looks up at me with those big old brown eyes, and she says, "Mike, what am I going to do about Tommy?" I looked around a second, and I said, "Well, Dad, looks to me like you're either going to have to marry him or start carrying a gun." Well, I know she married him. I don't know about the rest of it. And then Louis Bagwell and Larry Hardy sitting there with their wives. They were a couple of years older. Hardy was always like a big brother. Bagwell loved music. He took me down on 6th Street, being a couple of years older, you know. So anyway, we heard some great music down there. Jerry Jeff Walker, Michael Martin Murphy, B.W. Stevenson's. Some of the things y'all have never heard of. But it was fun. I look at the other table, and there's Bill Bethay, sweet. He was Gus's assistant coach. And he was only like 7 or 8 years younger than we were, and he had lived the dream that we all had. First-team All-American, played in the big leagues. He was there every day. Thanks for being there. Randy Peschel sitting over there, consummate gentleman and champion. Just an attaboy from Peschel, always meant a lot to all of us. Joe Silberstein and Nita are sitting there. I worked for Joe at his clothing store on the drag called The Whale. And you don't think much about that when you're 19 or 20 years old, but 12 years later, when I win the overall National Excellence in Marketing Award at the IBM National Training Center in Dallas, you think back, well, wow, maybe working at the Whale got me my start. I know it taught me how to run a vacuum cleaner, but anyway, and then there's a kid sitting over there named Marty Reynolds. And Marty played American Legion baseball for me up in Springdale. And he also worked for me at the bank that I ran. And my friends up there would tease me and said, Beard, you're the only guy we ever knew that had to hire a guy so he'd have somebody to go to lunch with. And there's Jack and Cindy Miller over there. And, you know, great family, great center fielder, started her own business. I mean, he's just another one of the guys that I grew up with here. Great family, great work ethic, good person. And then who did I miss? Oh, Mark, Harmon, and Kristen. I was worried about Mark and Kristen coming because this was a very significant weekend for Kristen, and this is the first year she has had a birthday while they've been married. They're newlyweds, May, I think. And all I can say on this, Kristen, is I hope you don't have to spend your next 60th birthday or next 60 birthdays with a bunch of old men that used to wear jockey shorts or jockey straps. There we go, jockey straps. Well, then the last guy I've got to say something about is Coach Gustafson. And, you know, Coach kind of alluded to it over here in the introduction. I mean, everybody on this team was all something. And one year, Carl Erskine, the great Brooklyn Dodgers pitcher, came down here before we started our season. He had a son, Gary Erskine, that was playing for us. He was a freshman. And Carl was sitting over on the bench with Coach Gus. And Carl asked Gus, says, well, what kind of prospects have you got around here? Gus looked out on the field and he says, you see that big blonde right-handed kid there? Carl said, yeah. He said, well, that's Bert Hooton. He's 20 years old. 20 years from now, we'll look back and he may have been the greatest right-handed pitcher that ever came through the University of Texas. Yeah, okay. Then Gus says, you see that kind of skinny left-handed kid he's playing catch with? Yeah, that's Mike Beard. He's 20 years old. 20 years from now, he's got a shot at being 40. And I'll have you know, I bet I'm the only scholarship athlete that was on a full ride here for 3 years, and Gus never did give me that $10 a month laundry money. Just try harder. But you know, Gus has a new bride, and congratulations to you guys. And Gus and Joe Silberstein used to be great friends. And I can just imagine Gus and Ann, Nita, and Joe double dating in a pink Cadillac out at the Chief Drive-In. For those of you who don't know, Ann was a long-time Mary Kay lady. But, you know, you're not at the University of Texas very long before you figure out that your job is to win a national championship. Some of us do, most of us don't. Maybe a few of us should have. But you carry that idea with you all the way through life. For me, after baseball, it was IBM, it was Merrill Lynch, it was at banking. I was a developer, I was a coach, I was a boss. You know, maybe it comes down to what kind of a husband you turned out to be, or a father, or maybe just a friend. And there's no saying if you go through life and you have 5 good friends and 1 great bird dog, you probably were pretty successful. Well, I think I covered that. And maybe somewhere along the way, maybe I picked up a national championship. But a bunch of it began right here in Austin, Texas, and from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank the Tea Association, Coach McWilliams, Tommy, especially you guys that happen to have voted for me. thank you so very much. And old Bevo's going to look good on my mantle back up in Arkansas. Thank you, guys.